Although I recently said Gorok's one of the worst quote-unquote tank archetype lords, I don't know that he necessarily fits directly into that category since he doesn't have healing. He does have good armor-piercing damage and decent stats all around, especially 60 melee defense. 45 attack isn't amazing, but he was a great beneficiary of the changes to stagger and knockdown because he has expert charge defense, and previously it was just non-functional, right? So now he's much better at fighting everything, basically. Like I mentioned with my recent Sigvald video, he's got physical resistance here from the Rock of Itza and Mace of Olmec. This is Noob for Life, in case you're wondering why the Lizardmen are the enemy team. It's Noob for Life playing against myself as the Tomb Kings, which this is an ideal matchup, I think, for Gorok. Tomb Kings tend to struggle against foot characters anyway, especially like good armor-piercing kind of combat characters, like obviously the anti-large specific ones like Gotrek or Ungrim, or even somebody like Grimgor. I guess Grimgor's more of a pure combatant, right? He has some anti-large, I guess, from Gitsnik. Does he actually? Maybe not. Anyway, yeah, you can see the Lizardmen moving in here. Sora Spears, very good in this matchup, and actually just better than they were in general. I used to not be a big fan of Sora Spears, but we've got Ancient Sally here. Nice kind of skill use. 2 Rev Crystals to help tank damage. A couple of Pterodons already just messing up my backline of Skeleton Archers. Brought some Nehekara Warriors to see how they would trade against Saurus, potentially with some buffs or debuffs. Cetra on his kitty, fighting the Rev Crystal here. Got a couple of Tomb Guard with Halberds as well. Casket of Souls currently blasting, trying to get some value before it gets taken out. And yeah, a couple of Skeleton Horsemen who are doing a really nice job countercharging in, getting those Pterodon Riders. Would have liked to have had some carry-in for sure, but yeah, you know, you live and learn. Beastcaster summons up a Manticore here, and meanwhile Gorok's just pushing up the center, and the reason why Tomb Kings struggle against foot characters is because they don't really have like a great foot combat character. Like Khalidah's okay on foot, she's really much better on her Snek, and she's actually very good now, I think, on her Snek. I've been having a lot of success with her and been seeing other people having a lot of success, but yeah, they don't really have, like, because one of the best ways of fighting foot characters is with other foot characters, like just, you know, like having cheaper foot characters that can fight them well enough to kind of support against other things. You can see the Summon Manticore here. Again, I'm using these Skeleton Horsemen, who are definitely going to be MVPs, spoiler alert, for me in this battle, trying to counter that Manticore there. But Gorok, like, I really, in this build, realistically, other than just grinding him down, I don't have a lot that can harm him. I mean, Cetra cycle charging him, certainly, but I would have to be charging him from the side or rear, given that he has that expert charge defense and that's actually functional now. But just trying to get a hold of these Rev Crystals here. Been able to do okay against the Saurus. You can see out on this flank, I got more or less a clean one-on-one engagement. I think maybe the Casket might have hit them once or twice, but the Nehekara Warrior's actually trading quite well against the Sora Spears, which I'm happy about. But I'm having a hard time corralling this Ancient Salamander and these other monsters. The fact that I can't do enough burst damage to them, like I could potentially grind them down, but I can't do enough burst damage to actually, you know, finish them off, and that means the Rev Crystals can kind of just keep healing each other and just soaking HP damage. Nice shots from the Ancient Sally coming in here too. Detonating on the Tomb Guard especially. Tomb Guard don't have a whole lot of armor and that kind of big splash. I mean, does armor-piercing fire damage anyway, so going to be very good against Cetra. It will apply additional fire weakness to him, right? Ancient Salamander, I'm planning on covering this at some point, but kind of forgotten about, largely. It does have a flammable effect. Also armor-piercing melee attacks and a decent charge, 40 charge, so kind of comes all in with the 2 Bastiladons there. None of them really kind of considered great combat monsters necessarily, but they're here, and triple teaming on Cetra like that's okay, although the Halberds have something to say about it. Routing off one of the Stegodons there, sorry, Bastiladons. Another Manticore summon coming to get me for my heresy of getting the names wrong, and the Skeleton Horsemen, again, just kind of getting rear charges, trying to break leadership of the Sora Spears, which we have been able to largely do. They actually haven't generated all that much value. But, yeah, the Pterodons, the fact they're still hanging around is a problem. Like this unit, for example, still has 7 of 8 unit models online, although they've lost most of their HP. Their missile attacks are still doing full strength, right? And they can just sit up there in the sky and be relatively safe. Nice big Flock of Doom blob for the Beastcaster as well. And, yeah, like I said, I'm just having a hard time finishing off these these Bastildons, and Bastildons are big enough, as is the Ancient Salamander. I don't really have that great of a surround on them, so he can't just kind of pull through the skeletons. I guess there was a Lane of Saurus for him to pull through there as well. Yeah, I just can't keep these monsters corralled here. Like, I'm having a hard time focusing. I only have the one single entity from Cetra, right? So it's not like I can go, like, you know, try and get him isolated. Instead, it's me trying to not have Cetra be too isolated and really just kind of trying to sweep through the halberds and the spears and see if that will work. Meanwhile, Gorok, who I've completely not forgotten about, wasn't supposed to be the highlight of this video or anything, he's just chatting straight through these guys too. I mean, he really doesn't seem to mind the skeleton mass too much. Oop. Apparently he'll just smash those skeletons down right there. But basically the thing to note about him is he's taken 0 damage, mostly. And the damage that he has taken, he can get healed from the Rev Crystals, although one of them is now routed. Fortunately, I don't have too many mobility units that could keep it routed. I guess I do have these Skeleton Horsemen, but I only have the 2 of them. And let's see how I potentially misuse them here. Also, this Nekara Warrior is way over chasing on those Saurus Warriors they beat. I mean, granted, cost-effective for them. Really would have liked to have him back in the fight right about now. Things are looking a little dicey, and you can see we do dispatch the 1 Skeleton Horseman to try and chase this Rev Crystal off. Going to be very important for me to do so. Same thing if I can catch any of these other units and route them. Gorok has reunified with 1 Rev Crystal, though, so he can start grinding through these Tomb Guard. And, yeah, Tomb Guard don't really have the melee attack to get hits consistently on Gorok, and, like, the regular Tomb Guard also don't have the best AP values, so there's just not really, other than cycle charging him with monsters, which, again, a lot of Footlords like Gorok are better against that now. Tomb Kings don't really have a way of dealing with them. You can try and shoot them with certain units, but it's not great. Like, it's not as good as other factions, certainly. Skeleton Archers aren't amazing in terms of accuracy, and Ushabti Greatbows have a hard time as well with hitting infantry character, right? So it's a weird one. It's an interesting interaction. The Necrotechs have anti-infantry, right? And they're just not good enough combatants, unfortunately. I mean, if you get, for example, Gotrek like 2v1 versus your Necrotechs, granted, usually you want to save your Necrotechs, keep them alive to use their restores, right? That's kind of the whole reason you bring them in the first place, is to heal your constructs. But yeah, they just don't do enough, especially against the, like I said, the top tier kind of combatants, people like Grimgor, Gorok. I would put Gorok maybe not in the full top tier of combatants, but he's pretty decent, and he's really not too expensive for what he gives you. And this is, I say again, this is probably his most ideal matchup, but there are some other matchups I could see him working well in, and just in general, I could see Gorok working much better because of the mass embracing changes. Gets in with his swarm of pterodons, does get knocked over by that thing. But, yeah, he's fine. He's got his Mace of Olmec out. Salamander with a side charge there, keeping Cetra from disengaging. He's getting kind of stagger-locked a little bit here. You managed to screen with some spears, and things are looking pretty close. If I can finish off, you know, these monsters and still have enough HP left on Cetra, the Cycle Charge Gorok, maybe, just maybe, I have enough HP to kind of soak through him. But we'll see. It's going to be very, very close. These Nekesh's Scorpion Legion also, unfortunately, because they're being poisoned, aren't fast enough to keep up with that Bastildon, who's faster than them anyway, baseline. I was hoping they could get in contact and poison the Bastildon and slow them down, but in fact, Skink poisons you, which of course I should have figured. And the Tomb Guard, as I discussed with my last video, talking about, was it my last video? A recent video, let's say, a Norska versus High Elves. And this is definitely a mistake. I pull through and kind of get 2v1'd. I do manage to finish this Rev Crystal, but the Salamander does fire damage, and of course, Cetra is weak to fire, so this nice little rear charge action, although this Ancient Salamander definitely would lose in a straight-up fight because it just doesn't have enough HP, a really nice kind of cheeky charge here. Noob for Life definitely not living up to his name here, and having some really nice plays, finishes off Cetra there. The Ancient Sally, and you don't see Ancient Salamanders like shine too often anymore, so it's fun to see that too. Considered making this video about him specifically, but you know, Gorok, a buffed Footlord. Buffed Footlords are kind of in vogue right now. I've been talking about a few of them recently, so wanted to highlight this boy. I would need to look. I don't remember if Gorok got any direct changes in the patch notes, but the infantry bracing was a huge benefit to him, and the fact that his charge defense is actually functional now. Him and his Pterodon buddies finishing up last of that. I've got a few kind of tattered remnants scattered around. We'll fast forward as I try and reunify and finish things off. The Tomb Guard, of course, decent enough leadership that they'll hold out, and that one Nehekara warrior who way over chase. We've also got one Skeleton Horseman hanging around, which I feel like the Skeleton Horseman, it didn't get all that much damage value in terms of XP, but 625, basically like Nehekara Horseman damage value, but only paid 400 for him, so that's great. I'm a fan of cheap light cavalry in general. It can just be multi-utility and useful in many, many ways. I guess it's just said the same thing twice, but differently. Anyway, let's keep fast-forwarding as Gorok blends up the last of the Tomb Guard, makes his final stand. Says, get out of here, you silly Skeleton Horseman. Try and shatter as many Saurus units as I can so they don't come back. And okay, let's see if we can cycle charge with Skeleton Horseman against Gore. Yeah, that's not good. Not looking good. Nice Flock of Doom as well. Pocket Flock of Doom. Try saying that 5 times fast. From the Skink caster, and it's a GG. Very well played. Noob for life. Like I said, not living up to his name at all, and actually playing that one quite well. I like this build. It's very strong. I mean, maybe I would change one of these Bastiladons, or both of them possibly, for solar engines, but I like this quite a bit, honestly. Gorok, 134 kills, only 727 damage value, but I mean, again, taking almost no damage, which is the important part here. I think he probably still loses to a Hyro Titan, but if you get caught out mono-a-mono versus a Hyro Titan, you probably did something wrong, considering you have infinite poison missiles, and yeah, anyway, it's very slow. Gorok, yeah, just tanking damage and doing enough damage in return, mind you, to get it done was enough. Skinks kind of just actually decent, and I was not expecting that. Saurus Spears, I was able to counter them well with the Nehekara Warriors. Have to say, Nehekara Warriors, I'm pretty happy with them generally. 2 of them, especially these 2, kind of got crumped a little bit by the Monster Mash in the center. And Bastiladons, again, not a ton of damage value, but the healing definitely very strong. Probably the damage value you'll see on mine is inflated because of the healing, slightly, but Pterodon's doing their thing. Very cost effective, but look at this, man, almost 3,000 damage value from that Ancient Salamander. It is a high micro piece. If you can pull it off, your opponent doesn't have the right tools to deal with it, it can be absolutely devastating, and it was here for sure. A real big problem. Cetra almost paid for himself, all things considered, plus his support. And look at this, 800 damage value on some Skeleton Spears is awesome. Like I said, Nehekara Warriors, 2 of them definitely paying for themselves. One of them almost doubling up there, which is quite nice. Tomb Guard also. Really like Tomb Guard with halberds now. I find them to be pretty consistently paying for themselves. The Skeleton Archers were just bad, though. They got hard countered by the Pterodons, which, even though they did a little bit of damage in return, my kind of counter charge with the Horsemen wasn't enough to finish off the Pterodons, and I definitely needed some carrion to try and take them on in melee, I think, or to chase them off through the air. But yeah, at least they both paid for themselves. Casket was also a big womp, you know. I don't know, guys, it's late. I've been recording a lot of videos today. Yeah, let's go ahead and just finish up talking about Gorok a little bit. I talked about him just a tad bit recently in my video about Sigvald, but look at what the White Lizard brings to the table. Let's switch on over to his faction, which is a really nice color scheme, by the way. Very classy. Yeah, he does have Stand Your Ground, which is nice. A nice little AoE melee defense buff. He does have another one here, which I didn't catch if he was using this, but it is a nice one to have. Expert charge defense in an AoE, and 60 armor especially, given that, you know, the infantry more so than the monsters. Like, this is kind of overkill to use on a lot of the monsters, although it's still probably solid. But Saurus infantry generally, yeah, 60 armor only, even Temple Guard only 85, which is really not amazing for a quote-unquote elite halberd. Field of Aeons, though, plus 60 armor and expert charge defense for those units is quite nice. Not that Tomb Kings have a ton of units which are really dangerous on the charge, I mean, I guess the kitties have pretty good charge. Chariots, okay, so maybe they do have some pretty good charging units. But yeah, it's nice to have that. He's also got this, which is if his HP goes below, he gets a little bit of extra melee attack and leadership. I don't know that I would necessarily take this because I try not to get him below half HP. But yeah, the Mace of Olmec is another one. These kind of damage spike items, if your opponent avoids the engagement, which they can quite easily for a Foot Lord, you end up just wasting the gold on this. So I typically don't take those. That's just me personally. I prefer to allocate the gold elsewhere. But yeah, look at that unholy number there for Gorok with this particular loadout. Base cost, though, as we saw, is pretty cheap. And yeah, 1,200 points. This melee attack is just really not amazing. This is kind of, in my view, the biggest downside to using Gorok is you don't get a melee attack buff from your Lord, which for Lizardmen can be very important. The Saurus Old Blood, for example, having the Horn of Kygor. Same thing for Kroxgor Ancient, has the same item, right? Both of these are quite nice to have a melee attack buff. You know, you can take various Slans to give you that attack buff. It's not super critical. Often healing can be more important, and just tanking the damage, as we saw there, is definitely a viable way to go. But it is a little bit sad that he doesn't have any AoE melee attack buff, more just defensive buffs, right? So there's that. Potentially also can, yeah, the melee attack buff, I guess, really the only thing you can do you bring him is bring Heavens, which I would definitely say Manticores are probably better. Even after the nerfs, Manticore is still probably one of the best spells in the game, but you can do this like Harmonic Convergence, gives you just a single target, which is okay. No area of effect on Overcast, but you can get an additional armor, so you could actually stack those two abilities together and get 90 extra armor on a single unit, which would put Saurus up to, what, 150? Absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, Temple Guard. Oh man, that's a lot of armor. That's a lot of armor. Be very tanky, but probably most people are going to bring armor piercing against the Lizardmen anyway. So there's that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching this one. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.